guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another spiritual motivation video. Today I had this kind of feeling this week of just severe anxiety. It's been worse than usual, probably for obvious reasons. Just a lot of uncertainty in the world and a lot of just things to worry about. And so as I was reading this past week, I came across this passage in John that I'm sure a lot of you know about. It is the story of Lazarus and Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And it kind of helped me open my eyes to the bigger picture and just gave me hope. So I hope that this story can give you a little hope as well during this time of uncertainty. So I'm going to go ahead and just start reading a couple verses from this passage in John. So John chapter 11, 1 through 44, and I'm just going to read the first couple of verses to start off with. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as, oh Lord, Didymus? I'm sorry if I butchered that. Said to the rest of his disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Okay, so as we know, Martha and Mary sent word to Jesus that their brother Lazarus was sick. And Jesus was obviously not in the same town that they were. They had to send snail mail. They couldn't just text him or give him a call. So it got there, it could have gotten there maybe a couple days after Lazarus had gotten sick. And Jesus knew whenever he got the message that Lazarus probably didn't have much time. But he decided to stay where he was for 2 more days. Before he set off, he was telling his disciples why they were going back to Judea. And his disciples didn't understand, because he said, "Well, Lazarus is sleeping. Why wake him up? Because sleep is good for you." And Jesus said, "No, he's dead." Okay, bluntly, he said he's dead. So this is why I am going to him, to wake him up, to bring him back to life. And so right there, we know that Jesus knows that Lazarus is dead. He probably knew that staying 2 more days meant that Lazarus would die. So let's go ahead and move on to verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Okay, so his death is very fresh. If you've ever lost somebody, you know that grief is a very hard thing to go through. So this is still an open wound for Mary and Martha. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. So the thing that stuck out most to me was the fact that Martha doubted Jesus. She said, if you were here, my brother would still be alive. And to me, I think that if we took ourselves, went back in time, we know that Jesus performed all these miracles, and knowing that he could have been there and saved, your brother or your family member's life, I think that they were really hurt by that. Like, because God didn't, or Jesus didn't rush to them at ASAP, they felt probably that he took his time, and they didn't understand. So moving on, he goes to Mary goes and tells Martha that he's here. Oh, sorry, I am so confused. Martha went and told Mary that Jesus was here. And so when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. So when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. So, again, we have Mary, who is doubting Jesus. Martha had already said, if you would have been here, my brother would have still been alive. And here comes Mary saying the same exact thing. She is filled with grief, and she doesn't understand why this had to happen this way. Jesus didn't come on their time. If he would have been there, none of this would have happened. And I think that we can relate to that right now in this pandemic. God could have easily stopped the first person who got this virus. He could have nipped it in the bud and just stopped it right there in its tracks, but he didn't. And I think that's where a lot of us, maybe sometimes being in quarantine, kind of start thinking, okay, why didn't he stop it if this was going to cause so much trouble? Like, it's affecting everything in everybody's life. And I think, just like last week, I really think this has a lot to do with faith and trusting God, to let our faith become our reality instead of our fear. And going back to verse 35, Jesus wept. A lot of scholars believe that he wept because, he loved Lazarus, and Lazarus was dead and he was experiencing grief. And while I believe partly maybe it was because of that, I think mainly a lot of other scholars say that it was because of the lack of faith that Mary and Martha had. And I believe that was more of it versus just Jesus grieving Lazarus. I think that Jesus was sad because of the lack of faith that Mary and Martha had in him. They knew who he was. I mean, Martha even said, you are the Messiah. But yet she doubted him, and she doubted what he could do, and she doubted his timing. And I think that really just broke his heart. And as we are living in a world of uncertainty, high death tolls, canceled events, big events. I know that I was supposed to walk the stage in May for my college, and I probably won't be doing that. It's not looking very good right now, and I really wanted to do that, but instead of questioning God and who he is and why he didn't show up ASAP on our time, I believe that everything is going to be okay. We just have to put our trust in him. So if we go ahead and read more of this. So Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" There we go. The third time. People are doubting him. They're like, okay, this Jesus guy, he heals, he performs miracles, but he couldn't save this guy from dying. Okay, maybe this Jesus guy isn't as great as we think he is. So Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Again, here we go. Martha is doubting him. She's saying, why am I removing this tomb? He's dead. He's been dead for 4 days. It stinks in there. Why would you want me to open this thing up? Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." So once again, people doubted him multiple times. And he's saying a prayer saying, "God, I know that this too would pass. I know that there are always a victory in you. But I'm saying this for the benefit of the people here that had a lack of faith, that didn't believe, that just gave up on me, gave up on you." And I think that during this pandemic, I know there are many times, where we are just sitting at home and kind of just sad, that the world is like this right now. There's so many things, my baby won't get to have his first Easter, but I'm going to dress him up for Easter. Don't even doubt that. But what I mean is, we're not going to get to go out. We're not going to get to go to church as a family. We're not going to, have a little Easter egg hunt, even though he would not be doing anything. I would be Easter egg hunting for him, but still, just like things that you would expect your first baby to be able to do. He's not going to be able to do that. And yes, I know I'm going to watch church from home. We're going to still have Easter family dinner, but it's just different. So I think that as we face this time of uncertainty, we shouldn't have a mindset of God could have prevented this. Why did God let this happen? Instead, we should think, how can I grow from this? How can my faith grow from this? So in review, Lazarus had died after Martha and Mary sent a warning to Jesus, and Jesus left 2 days later. When he arrived, Mary and Martha were upset. If Jesus would have been here, he could have done something. If Jesus, was here, if he just would have stopped this virus from spreading, if he would have just stopped this thing in my life from happening, I wouldn't be experiencing the aftermath of it right now. I wouldn't be here in this pain. I wouldn't be here in this uncertainty. And it doesn't just have to relate to this virus. Anything in life that you feel like God could have showed up earlier, but he didn't. You can relate to this. So after Jesus heard both of them say this, he wept. Some scholars, like I said, believed it was because he was sad for the loss of his friend, but others say it was because of Mary and Martha's lack of faith, and I believe that, just because I think Jesus was truly heartbroken. Jesus was not worried about getting there as soon as possible, like Mary and Martha expected him to. We expect God to be there on our time, but I just want to say it was never about our time, and it was never about us. And I think that's where we lose focus. We need to shift our worry to faith, and then let faith become our reality, so that we don't lose focus of what's most important in our life. And it was never about us, always about him. It was always about Jesus, and it will always be about him. This is where I believe right now in this pandemic and the effects of the pandemic and anything in your life that you are just worried about, that you have anxiety about, let your faith become your reality, and keep your focus on God, because God has never failed you, and he won't. He never will. And there is always a victory in Jesus. There's this song I was listening to, this worship song by Elevation Worship, and it just says, I'm gonna see victory, for the battle belongs to the Lord. This is not your battle to fight, even though, yes, it is your life. It's not your battle. And don't carry this burden. Like I said last week, you were never meant to. And just give it all to him, because he wants to give you peace, and he will give you peace that transpasses all understanding. So I hope that through this story of Martha and Mary and Jesus, you got gave you a little hope to know that God has a plan. Even though he is not here on our time, he has a plan, and there will always be a victory. And we must know, when we forget, when we are lacking faith, and when we are worrying, we must remember that the battle is already won, and that we already know how this story ends, so that we need to have faith. So that's all I got for today. The story gave me so much hope, and I hope that it gave you a little hope as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.